The Nexus Military Academy's training floor had seen its share of disasters. Plasma explosions, gravity well malfunctions, the infamous incident where a Calvarian cadet had accidentally weaponized photosynthesis. But none of those events had triggered a facility-wide evacuation order quite like this one. Commander Thexali watched through the observation deck's reinforced viewport as every single threat assessment scanner in Gymnasium 7 bathed the room in angry crimson light. The automated voice echoed through the corridors with mechanical urgency. Code Vermilion, Class 12 extinction hazard detected. All personnel evacuate immediately. Fascinating, muttered Dr. Cassandra, the Academy's senior xenobiology instructor, her forearms folded in what passed for Zelhari skepticism. The scanners appear to be having some sort of collective malfunction. Thexali's compound eyes swiveled toward her. Malfunction? Those sensors cost more than most star systems' defense budgets. Then explain to me why they're registering a Class 12 threat level from Cadet Mitchell, who is currently attempting to move a sparring dummy 3 meters to the left. Down on the gymnasium floor, the source of the chaos stood in bemused confusion. The human, average height, unremarkable build, wearing the standard issue training uniform, had paused mid-lift with her hands wrapped around what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary combat training apparatus. Her expression suggested she was trying to solve a particularly mundane puzzle, rather than, according to the Academy's most sophisticated monitoring systems, preparing to end all sentient life in a 12-parsec radius. Maybe she's concealing a weapon, suggested Lieutenant Morthak, his Kytheran vocal sacs inflating with nervous energy. In her bare hands? Dr. Cassandра's tone carried the particular brand of condescension reserved for lesser intellects. The probability calculations, interrupted Commander Thexali, consulting his tactical display, indicate a 97.4% chance of total species extinction if current threat parameters are accurate. The evacuation was proceeding with admirable efficiency. Calvarian cadets had simply vanished into their native phase state, while the Mordaki contingent was implementing what their military doctrine called strategic dimensional relocation, which, to less sophisticated species, looked suspiciously like running away very, very quickly. Through the chaos, Cadet Mitchell remained focused on her task. She adjusted her grip, tested the weight distribution, and began a careful sideways shuffle that sent the threat assessment algorithms into fresh paroxysms of computational terror. She's moving it closer to the equipment storage, observed Dr. Cassandra with growing fascination. Fascinating behavioral pattern. Most species exhibiting Class 12 threat characteristics would be engaged in immediate territorial expansion or resource acquisition protocols. Most Class 12 threats don't reorganize furniture, Thexali replied dryly. Precisely my point. The Zelhari academics' lateral thinking processes were clearly engaged now. Either our threat assessment protocols require fundamental recalibration, or we're observing an entirely novel form of existential hazard. From a research perspective, this presents extraordinary opportunities. From a survival perspective, Thexali countered, this presents extraordinary risks. The debate might have continued indefinitely. Zelhari academics were notorious for their willingness to discuss theoretical frameworks while the universe burned around them. But Dr. Cassandra had already made her decision. She moved toward the gymnasium's main entrance with the purposeful stride of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved through rigorous intellectual analysis. Doctor, I must strongly advise— Commander, she interrupted, not breaking pace. I have spent the last 43 cycles studying xenobiological threat matrices. I refuse to allow a simple equipment malfunction to compromise legitimate scientific inquiry. The entrance to Gymnasium 7 dilated with a soft, pneumatic hiss. Dr. Cassandra stepped through the threshold and immediately triggered a fresh cascade of warning alerts. Her personal scanner, calibrated for close proximity threat assessment, began emitting a sound that could only be described as electronic shrieking. Cadet Mitchell looked up from her work. "Oh, hey, Dr. K, could you grab the other end of this thing? I think it'll fit better if we angle it toward the wall storage units." The request was delivered with such casual friendliness that Dr. Cassandra experienced a momentary cognitive disconnect. According to every sensor reading, monitoring protocol, and threat assessment algorithm in the Academy's considerable database, she was currently within lethal range of something that could theoretically eliminate her entire species. According to her actual sensory input, she was being asked to help rearrange exercise equipment by a slightly sweaty humanoid who appeared genuinely concerned about storage optimization. "You want me to help you move furniture?" "Well, technically it's a Mark 7 combat training apparatus, but yeah, basically." Mitchell gestured at the device with the sort of casual familiarity that suggested she had never considered it might be classified as anything other than mildly heavy. "The spacing's all wrong for proper rotation exercises. I figured if we shift everything about a meter clockwise, the flow patterns would work better for group training scenarios." Dr. Cassandra approached cautiously, her scanners shrieking, reaching frequencies that threatened to shatter the gymnasium's acoustic dampeners. "And you determined this how?" "Just looked at it." Mitchell shrugged, a gesture that somehow triggered 3 additional threat assessment subroutines. "I mean, it's pretty obvious once you think about the traffic patterns. See, if you've got 12 cadets running rotation drills and the equipment's positioned like this, you get bottlenecks at the transition points. But if you angle everything to follow the natural movement flow..." She began sketching spatial relationships in the air, her hands moving with unconscious precision. Dr. Cassandra found herself following the logic despite the continuing electronic protestations from every monitoring system within 50 meters. "That's actually quite sophisticated spatial analysis. It's just common sense." Mitchell grabbed one end of the apparatus and nodded towards the other. "You getting that end? Or should I ask one of the other instructors? Though they all seem to have left in kind of a hurry." Through the observation deck's viewport, Commander Thexali watched his senior xenobiology instructor engage in what appeared to be collaborative furniture arrangement with a Class 12 existential threat. His tactical displays were painting abstract art in shades of red and orange, while his communication systems buzzed with increasingly frantic status reports from evacuated personnel. The human and the Zelhari worked together with surprising efficiency. Within minutes, they had repositioned not just the original apparatus, but had somehow reorganized the entire gymnasium's equipment layout into what even Thexali's military-trained eye could recognize as a significantly more functional arrangement. "There," Mitchell said, dusting off her hands with evident satisfaction. "That should work much better for tomorrow's group sessions. Thanks for the help, Doc." Dr. Cassandra stared at the transformed space, her 4 arms hanging limp with intellectual shock. "You just optimized the entire training facility." "Made it a little more efficient, maybe." Mitchell checked the wall chronometer. "Shoot, I'm supposed to meet my study group in 10 minutes. You think somebody could reset whatever's making all those alarms go off? It's getting kind of loud." She headed toward the exit with the same casual purposefulness she'd displayed throughout the entire encounter. As she passed through the doorway, the threat assessment scanners gradually cycled down from code vermilion to their standard operational amber, leaving Dr. Cassandra alone in a gymnasium that had somehow been improved beyond recognition. From the observation deck, Commander Thexali activated his communication system. "All personnel, this is Commander Thexali. The situation in Gymnasium 7 appears to be resolved. Normal operations may resume." He paused, staring down at the reorganized training space. And someone schedule an emergency faculty meeting. We need to discuss our threat assessment protocols. Apparently, they may require some recalibration. The Academy's Conference Hall Beta had hosted diplomatic summits, military tribunals, and the occasional academic duel, but never had it witnessed quite such an assembly of bewildered xenologists. Professor Zithkorvak adjusted his ceremonial thinking crown as he surveyed the gathered faculty. Each representative species clustered according to their respective comfort zones and breathing requirements. "Colleagues," he began, his Mordaki throat flutes producing harmonious undertones of authority, "we are gathered to address what our administrative systems have classified as Incident Report 223847 Alpha. Spontaneous facility optimization by uncontained human subject." Dr. Veltharion, the Academy's leading expert on predator psychology, rustled his feathered crests with what his species considered thoughtful contemplation. "Before we proceed, shouldn't we establish whether we're dealing with an isolated behavioral anomaly or a representative sample of human cognitive patterns?" "An excellent question," replied Professor Zithkorvak, gesturing toward the holographic display that materialized above the conference table. "Which brings us to today's primary presentation. Dr. Nithalar, if you would." The Kitharan sociologist rose from her specialized seating apparatus, her research notes floating in a precise geometric array around her torso. She had spent the better part of 3 decades studying interspecies behavioral matrices, and her dissertation on theoretical aggression metrics was considered foundational reading in 7 different academic disciplines. "Esteemed colleagues," Dr. Nithalare began, her translator converting her biochemical communication patterns into audible speech, "I have spent the past 18 hours conducting a comprehensive analysis of available human behavioral data. My findings are problematic." The holographic display shifted, showing complex mathematical models and behavioral prediction algorithms. Traditional threat assessment protocols rely on established patterns: resource competition, territorial expansion, reproductive dominance displays. However, human behavioral matrices appear to operate according to entirely different parameters. She paused, manipulating the display to highlight specific data points. Consider the gymnasium incident. A rational threat response would involve either immediate attack or territorial claiming behaviors. Instead, we observed what can only be classified as environmental improvement initiatives. Professor Grixtel, whose species had evolved from pack hunters and consequently understood pack behavior better than most, leaned forward with interest. "You're suggesting their threat displays are actually helpful?" "I'm suggesting," Dr. Nithalare replied carefully, "that our fundamental assumptions about aggressive behavior may be inadequate when applied to human psychology." This statement triggered what could generously be described as animated discussion, and more accurately as barely controlled academic chaos. Dr. Veltharion's crests flattened with skepticism, while Professor Zithkorvak's throat flutes produced discordant notes of disagreement. "Respectfully," Dr. Veltharion interjected, his translator struggling with the rapid-fire clicks and trills of agitated Chekthari speech, "this analysis contradicts fundamental principles of evolutionary psychology. Helpful behavior patterns emerge only within established social hierarchies. Random assistance toward unfamiliar individuals represents either elaborate deception or severe cognitive malfunction." "Unless," suggested a new voice, "human social hierarchies operate on entirely different principles." The assembled academics turned toward the source of this observation. Cadet Mitchell herself, who had apparently arrived during the heated discussion and was currently leaning against the conference room's entrance with the relaxed posture of someone who had stumbled into an interesting lecture, Professor Zithkorvak's throat flutes produced what his translator interpreted as a gentle clearing sound. "Cadet, This is a closed faculty meeting. Oh, sorry. Mitchell straightened slightly but didn't leave. Dr. K mentioned you guys were trying to figure out why the scanners went crazy yesterday. I thought maybe I could answer some questions. The silence that followed was the particular variety that occurs when theoretical researchers suddenly find themselves confronted with primary source material. Dr. Nithalare recovered first. You wish to participate in our analysis? Sure, if it'll help. Mitchell glanced around the room with the sort of casual curiosity that sent several faculty members reaching instinctively for their personal threat detection devices. Though I'm not sure why reorganizing some equipment caused such a fuss. I mean, it was pretty obviously arranged wrong. Obviously? Dr. Veltharian's crests were now fully erect with academic fascination. You determined optimal spatial configuration through visual assessment alone? Well, yeah. I watched people use the space for a few weeks, and you could see where the bottlenecks were forming. Basic traffic flow analysis. Mitchell shrugged, apparently unaware that she had just described a process that would typically require advanced computational modeling and several months of systematic observation. Professor Grixtel activated his recording systems. And you felt compelled to address these bottlenecks because they were inefficient? Mitchell's tone suggested she was explaining something blindingly obvious. I mean, if you can make something work better without much effort, why wouldn't you? The question hung in the conference room's carefully regulated atmosphere, like an unexploded philosophical bomb. Dr. Nithalare's behavioral prediction models began generating new theoretical frameworks in real time, while Professor Zithkorvak's throat flutes had gone completely silent. You improved a system, Dr. Veltharian said slowly. That didn't belong to you, with no expectation of personal benefit, and no apparent hierarchical obligation to do so. I guess. Mitchell looked around the room with growing confusion. Is that weird? The assembled xenologists exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey several centuries' worth of accumulated academic uncertainty. Professor Zithkorvak finally found his voice. Cadet Mitchell, in your species' social structure, what are the typical consequences for individuals who modify shared resources without authorization? Depends on whether you made things better or worse, I suppose. Mitchell considered this. I mean, if you mess something up, people get annoyed. If you fix something, they usually say thanks. They express gratitude, Dr. Nithalare repeated, as if testing the words for some hidden meaning. For unsolicited system optimization. Right. Though honestly, most people just do this stuff automatically. It's not really a big deal. Dr. Veltharian's recording devices were now operating at maximum capacity. Most humans engage in spontaneous environmental improvement? Sure. You see something that could work better, you fix it. Doesn't everyone? The question produced another of those profound silences. This one lasting until Professor Grixtel spoke up with the tone of someone who had just glimpsed the edge of a vast and terrifying truth. No, he said quietly. No, Cadet Mitchell. Most emphatically, everyone does not. The mining moon Kepler 438c had been selected for joint training exercises, specifically because nothing interesting ever happened there. Its surface was a monotonous expanse of gray regolith, punctuated by automated extraction nodes, while its thin atmosphere provided just enough challenge to keep cadets alert without actually endangering anyone important. The Academy's safety protocols had classified it as boring but educational, which, in hindsight, should have been their first warning. Cadet Tavash pressed her face against the transport's viewport, watching the moon's surface approach with the enthusiasm of someone who had volunteered for extra credit in advanced xenogeology. The mineral composition readings are absolutely fascinating. Did you know they've detected 17 different crystalline structures in the subsurface layers? Riveting, muttered Cadet Brixtalk from across the cabin, his Mordaki physiology already adapting to the lower atmospheric pressure. Perhaps after we complete our survival certification, we can write poetry about rock formations. The transport's pilot, a seasoned academy instructor named Vexillar, had been running field exercises for the better part of 2 decades. His species specialized in risk assessment, and his threat evaluation sensors currently registered the mission as routine educational deployment with minimal hazard potential. This assessment would prove to be spectacularly incorrect, but not for any of the reasons his training had prepared him for. "Attention cadets," he announced through the intercom system. "We'll be deploying in approximately 7 minutes. Remember, this is a standard survival evaluation. Your objective is to establish a functional base camp, maintain communication protocols, and await extraction in 72 hours. Any questions?" Cadet Mitchell raised her hand. "What's the backup plan if something goes wrong with the pickup?" Vexillar's threat evaluation sensors registered this as a perfectly reasonable question from a well-prepared student. "Academy protocols mandate triple redundant extraction schedules, Cadet. The probability of mission failure is approximately 0.003%. Famous last words, as it turned out. The first sign of trouble came 18 minutes after deployment, when their transport's departure trajectory intersected with an unexpected debris field. The second sign came when the debris field turned out to be the remnants of a mining station that had experienced what the initial reports would later classify as catastrophic structural failure due to unforeseen geological activity. The third sign came when their emergency beacon registered nothing but static. "Well," announced Cadet Brixtalk, with the sort of philosophical calm that his species had evolved specifically for moments like this, "I believe we have just transitioned from routine educational deployment to actual survival situation." The mixed species squad had been chosen to represent the Academy's commitment to interspecies cooperation. Tavash provided geological expertise, Brixtalk offered strategic analysis, Cadet Jexwin contributed advanced communications training, and Mitchell had scored highest on the Academy's general problem-solving assessments, though nobody was quite sure what that meant in practical terms. "First priority is shelter establishment," announced Cadet Jexwin, consulting her datapad with professional efficiency. "Standard protocols recommend defensive positioning with optimal sight lines and proximity to potential resource sources." Tavash nodded enthusiastically. "The geological surveys indicate stable bedrock formations approximately 2.3 kilometers north-northeast. We could establish perimeter defenses and wait for rescue with minimal exposure to environmental hazards." Brixtalk's strategic assessment algorithms were already calculating risk matrices. "Agreed. Conservative positioning maximizes survival probability while minimizing unknown variables." 3 perfectly sensible responses from 3 well-trained cadets who had absorbed Academy survival doctrine exactly as intended. Mitchell, meanwhile, was staring at their surroundings with the expression of someone who had spotted something interesting. "Or," she said, "we could fix that." She pointed toward what remained of the mining station's central hub, currently embedded in the moon's surface at a 45-degree angle and emitting sporadic electrical discharges. The silence that followed was broken only by the faint hiss of atmospheric recyclers and the distant rumble of geological instability. "Fix that?" Tavash's voice carried the particular tone her species reserved for concepts that challenged their understanding of physical reality. "Sure. I mean, it's not completely destroyed. The main power coupling is still intact, and if you reroute the primary systems through the backup generators..." Mitchell was already moving toward the wreckage, with the purposeful stride of someone who had identified a project worth pursuing. Cadet Mitchell, Jexwin called after her. Academy survival protocols explicitly discourage interaction with damaged equipment. The risk assessment alone. Actually, the risk assessment is pretty straightforward. Mitchell's voice drifted back as she disappeared into the twisted remains of the mining facility. Either we sit here for 3 days, hoping someone notices we're missing, or we get the communications array back online and call for pickup ourselves. This observation triggered what could charitably be described as a philosophical crisis among the remaining cadets. Academy training had prepared them for resource management, threat evaluation, and coordinated group survival techniques. It had not prepared them for the possibility that their primary survival strategy might involve repairing industrial mining equipment with their bare hands. From inside the wreckage came the sound of metal being moved, followed by a series of impacts that suggested someone was implementing percussive maintenance techniques. "She's going to get herself killed," announced Brickstock with the resigned certainty of someone watching a natural disaster unfold. "Should we stop her?" asked Tavash. "Stop her how?" replied Jexwin. "Academic regulations are somewhat unclear on restraining fellow cadets who appear to be having constructive ideas." The sounds from the mining station had evolved into something that resembled organized construction activity. Occasional sparks of electrical discharge painted the moon's surface in brief, dramatic shadows. "Status update!" Mitchell's voice called from somewhere deep within the mechanical chaos. "I've got the primary power grid isolated, but I'm going to need someone with small hands to reach the coupling connectors. Tavash, you available?" Tavash looked at her squad mates with the expression of someone who had just been asked to participate in something that probably violated several Academy safety regulations. "I suppose I could assist with minor technical repairs?" 20 minutes later, she emerged from the wreckage covered in industrial lubricants and looking profoundly shaken. "She's connected the station's geothermal taps to the emergency beacon array," she announced in tones of bewildered respect. "It's completely outside standard engineering protocols, but the mathematical principles are actually quite sound." "Translation?" requested Brickstock. "Translation. We now have a communications system powerful enough to contact the Academy directly, plus enough surplus energy to run environmental systems for approximately 6 weeks. The silence that greeted this announcement was interrupted by Mitchell's triumphant emergence from the mining station, dragging what appeared to be a fully functional atmospheric processor. "Bonus round," she announced cheerfully. "Turns out they were in the middle of upgrading the life support systems when everything went sideways. Give me another hour and we'll have better air quality than the Academy dormitories." From orbit, the Academy's monitoring station registered an unexpected energy signature from Kepler 438c's surface. Flight Commander Kex Thari consulted her displays with growing confusion. "Vexillar, are you reading these telemetry reports?" The transport pilot's threat evaluation sensors were painting abstract art in shades of technological impossibility. "Confirm, Command. It appears the mining station is operational again?" "That's impossible. The geological survey showed complete structural failure." "Nevertheless, we're receiving a Class A priority communication request from the surface. Routing to your station now." The communication that followed would become part of Academy legend. "Academy Command, this is Cadet Mitchell. We've had some equipment difficulties, but everything's under control now. The mining station is back online, and we've improved the atmospheric processing by about 30%. Should we continue the survival exercise, or would you like us to start working on the geological instability issues? I think I know what caused the original structural failure." The Academy's grand ceremonial amphitheater had witnessed countless graduation ceremonies over the centuries, but few had featured quite such an elaborate security perimeter. Admiral Krexthul surveyed the assembled crowd through his personal threat assessment display, noting the discreet positioning of emergency response teams, the subtle energy barriers surrounding the podium, and the fact that approximately half the attending faculty appeared to be wearing protective equipment disguised as formal academic regalia. "Nervous?" asked Director Yashkari, adjusting her ceremonial sash with movements that somehow managed to keep her close to the nearest exit. "Not nervous," the Admiral replied carefully. "Cautiously optimistic." The graduating class of 2387 represented the Academy's most diverse enrollment in recorded history. 43 species, 12 different atmospheric requirements, and one human who had somehow managed to accidentally revolutionize 3 separate academic disciplines during her time as a student. The fact that Mitchell was graduating with highest honors while simultaneously being classified as a potential existential hazard struck everyone as exactly the sort of administrative paradox that defined modern military education. Distinguished faculty, honored guests, and graduating cadets, Admiral Krexthul, began, his voice carrying across the amphitheater with practiced authority. "We gather today to celebrate not just academic achievement, but the triumph of interspecies cooperation in the face of unprecedented challenges." The polite applause that followed carried undercurrents of what behavioral analysts would later classify as relieved gratitude that everyone had survived the experience. Professor Zithkorvac rose from his position among the faculty, his ceremonial thinking crown gleaming with academic distinction. This year's valedictorian represents a unique achievement in the Academy's history. Cadet Mitchell has not only maintained the highest academic standing in her class, but has also contributed to significant advances in facility optimization, emergency response protocols, and what our engineering department has classified as applied common sense theory. The mention of Mitchell's name triggered a subtle ripple through the assembled crowd, as several hundred beings simultaneously checked their personal threat detection equipment. The readings remained reassuringly stable, though Admiral Krexthul noticed that Dr. Cassandra was keeping what appeared to be a modified geological scanner trained discreetly on the human cadet. Furthermore, Professor Zithkorvac continued, her innovative approaches to problem-solving have resulted in what we believe to be the first recorded instance of a student accidentally improving Academy infrastructure faster than our maintenance department could document the changes. Mitchell stepped forward to accept her academic honors with the same casual purposefulness she'd displayed throughout her entire enrollment. Her graduation speech, mercifully brief, focused primarily on expressing gratitude for the learning experience and enthusiasm for whatever assignments lay ahead. She did not mention the 17 separate facility improvements she'd implemented, the 3 emergency situations she'd resolved, or the ongoing investigation into how she'd managed to optimize the Academy's entire food distribution system during a routine nutrition science project. "Thank you," she concluded, "for teaching me that there's always room for improvement, even when everyone thinks something is already working fine." The applause that followed was thunderous, partially from genuine appreciation, and partially from relief that the speech had ended without any spontaneous infrastructure modifications. Admiral Krexthul resumed the podium with the satisfaction of someone who had successfully navigated a complex diplomatic situation. "Graduates, you now embark upon careers of service to the Galactic Defense Force. Each of you has been assigned to positions that best utilize your unique talents and capabilities." The assignment announcements proceeded according to standard protocol. Tactical specialists to fleet commands, communications experts to diplomatic missions, engineering prodigies to research stations. Each assignment represented careful consideration of individual abilities and organizational needs. "Cadet Mitchell," the Admiral announced, consulting his datapad with the expression of someone reading from a very interesting document. "You have been selected for assignment to the newly created Extreme Hazard Monitoring Division with immediate deployment to the Andromeda Sector Investigation Unit." The silence that followed was the particular variety reserved for moments when everyone present realizes they have just witnessed something historically significant. Director Yashkari leaned towards the Admiral with barely concealed curiosity. The Extreme Hazard Monitoring Division was established last week, wasn't it? 3 days ago, he replied quietly, along with specialized protocols for managing personnel who demonstrate beneficial but potentially destabilizing capabilities. And the Andromedas Sector investigation? A collection of previously unsolvable problems that High Command has been cataloging for the past century. Spatial anomalies, derelict technology, mysterious energy signatures, that sort of thing. Director Yashkari processed this information with growing comprehension. You're sending her to fix problems that we've officially classified as unfixable. I'm sending her, Admiral Krexthul corrected gently, to investigate phenomena that require unconventional approaches. The graduation ceremony concluded with traditional expressions of hope for the future and confidence in the new generation's ability to meet whatever challenges lay ahead. The assembled faculty and guests dispersed with the relieved satisfaction of people who had attended a potentially dangerous event that had concluded without casualties. In the Academy's administrative offices, a small group of senior staff remained behind to finalize paperwork and conduct post-ceremony analysis. So, Dr. Cassandra observed, reviewing her threat assessment readings, we've now officially graduated our first student who registers as simultaneously the safest and most dangerous individual in Academy history. Professor Zith-Korvac nodded thoughtfully. The behavioral analysis reports make for fascinating reading. According to our psychological evaluation protocols, she demonstrates zero aggressive tendencies, minimal competitive behaviors, and what appears to be a pathological compulsion to improve any system she encounters. Which, added Director Yashkari, explains why High Command considers her too dangerous to assign to anything that's currently functioning properly. Admiral Krexthul activated his personal communication device, which promptly displayed an incoming message from Galactic Defense Force headquarters. He read it with the expression of someone who had just received confirmation of a theory he'd been hoping was wrong. Gentlemen, ladies, and distinguished colleagues, he announced, I have just received word that Cadet Mitchell's transport to the Andromeda sector has experienced minor technical difficulties. The assembled faculty exchanged glances of weary recognition. Define minor technical difficulties, requested Dr. Cassandra. According to the preliminary report, her transport's navigation systems have been improved by approximately 400%. The crew quarters have been reconfigured for optimal efficiency, and they've somehow managed to reduce their travel time to the Andromeda sector by 6 days. Professor Zith-Korvac's throat flutes produced what his translator interpreted as philosophical resignation. How long before she reaches her first assignment? Admiral Krexthul consulted his display again. At current velocity, approximately 18 hours. And how long? Dr. Cassandra asked, with the tone of someone who already suspected the answer. Before High Command starts receiving reports about mysterious improvements to previously unsolvable problems? The Admiral smiled with the expression of someone who had just witnessed the resolution of a very old puzzle. Based on her Academy performance record, I'd estimate about 20 minutes after she arrives. In the depths of space, the transport vessel Methodical Progress continued its journey toward the Andromeda sector with unprecedented efficiency, carrying one human cadet who was currently engaged in casual conversation with the crew about some interesting modifications she'd noticed they could make to their sensor array. The ship's threat assessment systems had given up trying to classify her hours ago and had defaulted to displaying a message that simply read, "Classification error, please consult manual." The manual, it turned out, had no relevant entries for helpful.